Deja vu all over again. Wide receiver is a major question mark for Penn State, and that's not the only position group.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. It is a Locked On crossover to talk Penn State football and the transfer portal. My name is Seyko, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Brian Smith, portal expert, recruiting expert here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And of course, he hosts the Portal Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. Well, Brian, the transfer portal is somewhat winding down for Penn State, but they still have needs. They still have players they would like to add. We'll talk about those targets in addition to two position groups that at least are question marks. I won't go ahead and say that because I think Penn State has upgraded at wide receiver, but that's the thing. Is it enough? And the same thing goes for defensive end, the edge defender, because Penn State's going to run a ton of three-man fronts. But Brian, I want to get your perspective because right now, I look at this wide receiver room. I look at the edge defenders, the defensive ends, and I say Penn State has about 3, maybe 4 reliable options to this point at both spots.
It's not over. And just a reminder, I know you know this, but the portal ends on the 16th, but that's just to get in. It doesn't mean to sign. So we'll see where they end up on defensive line, et cetera, et cetera. But like wide receiver, we could start there. Getting Sowell and Eskildsen, like that's a great start. They know the scheme. They know the quarterback.
Yeah.
And they're guys that can go get the ball. They're proven. Okay, that's a great start. Does Penn State have depth there? No, they do not. And you've got to have 6, 7 guys just to run practice right. So I don't know what their numbers are per se. They got a couple other young players from Iowa State coming over.
Well, Koby Howard too. Those are the 3 names that I can easily rattle them off. Sowell, Eskildsen, and Koby Howard. After that, I'm completely unsure.
That's what I mean. Like they're going to get 1 or 2 more. It's inevitable. But what level are we talking about? We got to go just total upside and take some young guy that was a high recruit, maybe an FCS kid, maybe, well, like Trinidad Chambliss played D2 at Ferris State before we went to Ole Miss. Maybe they take some D2 kid. There are so many options with the transfer portals act. I'm not going to pigeonhole them into any one particular category, but they need to get at least a couple more beyond, and that's conservative, probably 3 or 4. Because you got to have numbers once guys get hurt, and players will get banged up. So I'm not worried about it yet, but this is my one steadfast moment. They need at least one more guy that can play right away. Probably somebody they're going to have to spend some cash on. Have no idea where he's going to come from, but minimum they need to do that. That way, Sowell and like Eskildsen are not like by game 8, like just wore out. They can't play every snap. They have to be able to come out of the game and feel comfortable about the next guy in the lineup, or otherwise the other team's just going to put everybody in the box and just shut you down. So it'll be interesting to see which players they come up with for visits down the stretch and who they get. But there's playing time available. It shouldn't be that hard to sell.
And Penn State doesn't have to run 4 or 5 wide receiver sets like USC does. We know the offense is going to be mostly 12 personnel, heck, 13 personnel. That's going to be the base. They have enough tight ends to go around. The wide receivers, though, that's where it's thin. And I agree with you. Okay. They're definitely targeting other players. It's a matter of, will they get anybody, especially at an instant impact level? So that's why it was so intriguing. Quincy Porter is in the transfer portal. Penn State's going to make a push for him. Well, they're interested, but the interest has not been reciprocated exactly. Same thing with Mylan Graham. Mylan Graham is in the portal, but he's not setting up a visit with Penn State. So that answers your first concern about, well, Penn State, they should go spend some NIL money and go get an absolute stud. Well, again, the interest is not exactly being reciprocated, but I'm sure, Brian, you remember Noah Rogers, who was highly touted out of the state of North Carolina, did go to Ohio State, didn't work out there, went to NC State, had a little bit of an impact, and now he's back in the portal. He actually visited. Other players that are on Penn State's radar, I'll throw out one name that entered it, Kyle Parker from LSU. this is someone that was a former, give or take, according to On3, a top 25 wide receiver out of high school. But again, it's just those are the instant impact type of players that they're going after, and they might, right? They might get Parker, they might get Rogers. There's definitely no chance for Porter or for Graham.
Look, there's probably one or two under the radar. This isn't like the high school scene where the kids talk to everybody and tell you about upcoming visits. It is what it is. But at the same time, whether or not Penn State staff is tight-lipped, it's a shorter list that we at least know about. Again, there could be more, but at least they're trying. And they've got a great start with the two kids coming over from Iowa State with the time of experience. So they can be selective, but I don't think Penn State fans should expect two more starter-level players right out of the gate. Maybe a couple more guys that have that talent, if not more, but are not experienced. That's probably my expectation. And then maybe a couple other depth pieces as well. But I think minimum they need another 3. Do you think more than that? Like, where do you think Penn State needs to be numbers-wise from this point forward at receiver?
I mean, I'm kind of waiting on some answers still. Lyric Samuel, who was a 3-star, 4-star in the most recent recruiting class, he hasn't announced yet, which is surprising. They retained Koby Howard, which is huge. The rotation of wide receiver 1, 2, and 3, positions to be determined as far as where they are actually lining up. But Sowell, Eskildsen, and Howard, I am content with that group for the most part. But how much is Brookins going to play? So what Penn State is doing is they are really taking a chance. They're taking, and they obviously know more than I do. Maybe Noah Polley, who's the wide receivers coach, just has a ton of optimism, a ton of hope, or just knows the evaluation that someone like Karan Brookins, who is 6'5", 200 pounds, is going to be ready to go. And that's why they're not being ultra aggressive in the transfer portal. Or Zay Robinson, who both are redshirt freshmen coming over from Iowa State. Maybe they assume that one of those guys will be that fourth. So you have it just, to me, it doesn't look like the 2 deep is filled. That's why we're having a conversation.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, it doesn't have to be elite guys. They just need a couple more guys that can play, maybe a couple more depth pieces, and they're good. I'm just going to say this. I know it's kind of low-hanging fruit answer, but this is Penn State. It shouldn't be that hard to get kids to at least visit. If there is, then they've done something terribly wrong, because it's a good program. It's a tradition-rich program. It's State U in Pennsylvania. I will be surprised if they don't meet their needs at receiver.
I think they're going to get somebody. It's just a matter of who. Okay, so I failed to mention another former Ohio State pass catcher, because he was a tight end, wide receiver, tight end again. Damarian Witten was somebody that is visiting. So if they can land Noah Rogers or Damarian Witten, I will definitely have a little bit more confidence there. Brian, I think it's just the fact that 2025, again, Trevor Pena and Trevor Pena eventually got better, but it was still such a struggle at wide receiver. 2024, 2023 were absolutely abysmal. And then 2025 still wasn't that significant step that we were more or less promised by the previous regime. So that's kind of why I just say, okay, do I need to be worried about this again? And right now it's just to be determined. Okay. I like Sowell. I like Eskildsen. I like Howard. But what if one of them gets hurt, right? You have to have those conversations because then Penn State's really going to be in dire straits. So it's about the depth. Okay. Primarily so, because I do like those 3 players. Speaking of depth, speaking of players that there's talent there, but maybe not enough. Edge defender, defensive end. We still have to get to that, but Penn State's strengths do outweigh some of these other question marks. So we're going to get to that and more coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what you're going to love about it. You get to use the profit boost on bets that you already feel good about. You can ride with the favorite when you think that team controls the matchup. You can take a shot on the underdog if you feel like an upset's coming, or build a parlay around the players and moments that you think will decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football because there's no waiting around. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. That's FanDuel. And once again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions and the Portal podcast your first listen or watch of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. If you haven't already, go check out the all-new Everydayer Club. As a member of the Everydayer Club, you will get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Nittany Lions, the Portal, and any of your favorite Locked On shows, compatible with Apple, Spotify, and every other major podcast app when you sign up for your respective show. You will also get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of these shows. Go to the links down in the show notes to learn more and join the Everydayer Club. All right, we're going to get to the strengths because Penn State, I think, is overloaded at places like tight end, as we've mentioned, a secondary, right? They just picked up Jeremiah Cooper, who was the number 11 not cornerback, defensive back, safety, number 11 overall player in the On3 transfer portal rankings that is now set to. So, they're just getting Iowa State's leftovers. No, they're not. They're getting some of the best players that are in the transfer portal. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. I want to go back to the questionable position groups. And that's the thing, Brian, we don't have this extensive list. It's just wide receiver and defensive end. So it's kind of this, these are your biggest issues. These are your problems. We saw how wide receiver can certainly make or break at points, but when you're in the playoff, right, it affects you when you're in a semifinal game or you're going up against the likes of Oregon or Ohio State, right? That's kind of the differentiator there. But you can win games running the football and being aggressive. At defensive end, though, Danton Lynn is definitely running a 3-4, 3-3-5, some sort of hybrid defense. Okay. I said, yeah, he'll bounce around between a 4-2-5, and he should, right? He'll have plays that are out of a 4-3, out of a 4-2-5, but the base, what he's going to run 75, 80% of the time are going to be odd man fronts because you almost have to. It's the same thing at wide receiver, Brian. I look at the edge defender group. They get Max Granville back. So they get a ton of defensive tackles in the portal, guys that are 320, 330, or just close to 300. So they are going to play those guys. But at defensive end, okay, you lose Chaz Coleman, you lose Zariah Fisher, you lose Jalen Harvey, Malachi Williams, Daniel Jennings. All right, I get it. That's pretty much your entire defensive end depth. You retain Max Granville, which is A+. You retain Ivan Kamaju. Those are your two starters. You get Alexander McPherson out of the transfer portal from Colorado, who certainly showed a lot of upside and promise in limited action with the Buffs. Again, after those three players, I'm really not entirely sure what Penn State has at those two. They're going to be stand-up edge defenders. I don't know what else Penn State has at this point. They can still get guys out of the portal, but who's going to be that next? You can't rely on just three pass rushers.
No, I mean, like even losing Jalen Harvey, that's unfortunate. It's just there's so many guys that have left and coming and going. It's hard to keep up with everybody, but let me give an example where you were talking about three-man line. Elijah Carnell is a guy that's roughly 290 that's coming over from Iowa State. They could probably play the big end, and if you needed him to, depending on circumstance, could also play nose guard. If you're
That's what I mean. Pass rushers.
Yeah.
They have plenty of defensive linemen, but not a lot of pass rushers.
Yeah. They need that stand-up outside linebacker. So how we categorize, there might be a linebacker on the roster that ends up playing defensive end, but it's just a stand-up backer. Mm-hmm. And they might take some other guys that we don't necessarily think. They might take a tight end out of the portal and move him there. There's all kinds of ways to do this if you're going to run a three-man front. It gets complex. Mm-hmm. To that end, they need a few guys that are 6'4", 240 to come to campus. That's exactly what you're talking about. It's ironic because Penn State's pass rush over the last 5-6 years has been really good, and that's the kind of players they've had. How do you find those guys all of a sudden? Again, they might have to find a few under the radar or diamond in the rough, whatever phrase you want to use, and that's fine because they'll have the big guys, which ironically is usually the harder thing to get. It's usually if you're going to run a three-man front, finding the 300-pounders is the problem. Penn State's going in reverse order. They got to find the edge rushers.
Yeah.
So it's only one or two, but if you don't have them in that scheme, you can be exposed very quickly because you got to get pressure on the quarterback or they'll pick you apart at this level.
And I'll highlight a couple of other players or just situations to be aware of. I highlight Max Granville as he's going to be the face of the edge defenders. He's coming off of a season-ending injury, which granted did happen over the summer. We found out about this in July of 2025. but still, it was something that kept him out for the entire season. A leg injury. I imagine. I don't want to speak where I don't know the severity, or I'll just give you the circumstances that we know. It was a leg injury that he sustained in a workout over the summer. I imagine he'll be back for the start of the 2026 season. I think that's plenty of time, but what will he be 100%? If he's their best player and he's kind of already starting with a rough patch, that doesn't set up Penn State in a more ideal situation, right? Kamaju, great to have him back because we saw a ton of upside with him later on in the season. They got Deshaun Burnett to come back, but he didn't play pretty much at all his true freshman season. He'll be a redshirt freshman, but is that the next guy that you're going with after Alexander McPherson? So it's Granville, Kamaju, McPherson, and then Burnett. Mason Robinson staying back. He was listed at about 252 pounds. So I guess that's another guy. He's a veteran, but hasn't played a whole ton in his Penn State career. Let me highlight Jackson Ford. Maybe Penn State's just very optimistic for someone who's a top 10 player out of the state of Pennsylvania, has college-ready size, believe it or not. He's 6'3", 240 pounds. He is projected to at least have the ability to play as a true freshman. Maybe that's your fourth guy.
That would be a great sign. I mean, you never want to play. The freshman's definitely going to play game with up front, O-line, D-line area. But if you can prove it in fall camp, then by all means. Hopefully he gets that opportunity and he makes things happen. But they're not in a terrible spot. But just remember, what Penn State has had the last several years is the exception, not the rule. Mm-hmm. Like they've been tremendous off the edge. It may go down a little bit, but the defensive philosophy is different. This defense looks for big plays in the back half of the defense. Like they confuse people. Their defense is probably going to do some of that. Lynn's going to bring over a hybrid defense, and the guys from Iowa State that are coming, some of the defense staff, they the same thing. They'll concoct something. They'll create pressures with linebackers, and it won't be the same kind of defense. But if you get home and create turnovers, who cares?
You play to your strengths. That's what you have to do. You play to your strengths. So let's begin to talk about some of the strengths. And then in conjunction with that, we'll get to what else they need out of the transfer portal. Brian, if we're going to stay on the topic of defense and how they're going to attack or really leverage themselves, it's with the defensive backs. They just added Jeremiah Cooper, who is arguably the best defensive back, one of the best defensive backs available. I like his versatility. He's kind of actually fallen off a little bit as an overall player. He broke out his sophomore year. He had 5 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, and then never really gained that form again in 24. And then he was injured, as we talked about a ton, in 2025, because we were scouting him as a player that Penn State needs. Well, they got him. He can play safety. He can play cornerback with also Davian Collins, Darius Dixon, Jameer Joseph, Zion Tracy, Marcus Neal, who comes over from Iowa State, Jamison Patton. Brian, I just named 7 players who are starting caliber for Penn State. They're going to run a ton of defensive backs. They're going to run a 3-4, 3-3-5. There you go. The 5 defensive backs again. But they're all those guys that I just named are starting caliber, with some of them already teetering or already are all conference caliber.
Yeah, the Cooper kid's the one I'm most interested in to see how they use him. Are they going to move him around a ton? He's athletic enough. And
he can do it.
Are they going to – how much zone are they going to run? How much – all that stuff is going to dictate this. Mm-hmm. Could he play nickel, corner, and safety at some point next year? I could see that. And that's where the defense gets frustrating, because I can just tell you from talking to quarterbacks in general, it's not scheme you're always looking at when you come to the line. It's like, okay, where's their best player at? Well, if you expect him to be in center field on 3rd and 6 and you see him wind up at corner – then you kind of wonder, okay, are they playing games here? Are they going to bring a zone fire? Like, when you could move players around like that, you really circumvent any losses that you have talent-wise. You make the quarterback think, you make the O-line think. That's when they play slow, and you can play those games and create mismatches just because they don't know what's coming and they play slow. That's the fun part of college football. In Iowa State, man, they didn't recruit the kind of kids that Penn State does normally. So bringing a few of their key guys over and then mixing it with some of the Penn State, like Granville, really athletic guy, it can work. Mm-hmm. It's just now, where does everybody line up? I'm not going to even remotely guess that. That's what coaches get paid to do. But, like, again, they got plenty of secondary players they can do that with, and they might blitz some of them off the nickel and the slot, all that stuff. Yeah. I think it'll be fun to watch Penn State's defense. I don't know how much access you guys are going to get for spring ball. I'm guessing about this much, but it'll be interesting because they have a lot of talent and some experience coming in, and that defense will be able to fluster most teams they play.
The idea is to combine the best of Penn State with the best of Iowa State, but then from the defensive perspective, use those, bulk up the interior of the defensive line, force teams to run to the outside, and then let the defensive backs fill. And these guys aren't just great in pass coverage. They will go up and make a play. They are not afraid to tackle. So that's the idea from Danton Lynn's perspective and what Penn State wants to do defensively. Oh, they'll just get run all over. No, that's why they went and got 320, 30-pound defensive tackles out of the portal, multiple, tons of them. So what else do they need? Penn State's got other strengths too. It's not just the secondary. We'll talk about what other things Penn State can look forward to in the 2026 season. That is coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. This episode is also brought to you by Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and how it feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's your one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh, and it's all in one place. So whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and your budget. You can pick up new bedding, accent pillows from Wayfair, and it will completely change how your bedroom feels. Cleaner, calmer, more put together. You will love that you can find pieces that will match your style without spending a fortune. Shopping is easy, delivery is smooth, and everything arrives exactly as expected. And honestly, getting back into a routine this year, it will honestly make getting back into a routine this year feel a lot more manageable. So get organized, get refreshed, and get back on track this year for way less with Wayfair. Head over to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That is WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Brian, there are other strengths that Penn State will certainly lean on. Defensive back's going to be one of them. Defensive tackle, I qualify that as a strength because you have multiple guys who can play nose tackle. You have multiple guys that can play those jumbo defensive tackles. Basically, Penn State, again, they are essentially married to the three defensive tackle front at this point. You have guys that are over 320 pounds. You have guys that are teetering on 300 that aren't necessarily pass rushers. So lean into that. That is a strength. So you're not going to be the ground game where Penn State did get gashed up the middle quite a bit, too often in 2025. That is taken care of. Linebacker, I don't know that I'll call it a strength, but you get Tony Rojas back. You add three leading tacklers at the linebacker spot, veteran guys from the transfer portal from Iowa State. So that is good. So I don't know that I will go. It's definitely not a weakness. It is definitely not a weakness. What else is a strength? We talked about tight end. I mean, Penn State has 3 starting caliber tight ends. That's why they're going to run a ton of 12 personnel. They should run 13 personnel. Gabe Burkle comes over. Benjamin Bramer comes over from Iowa State. And then you add in Andrew Rapplier, who showed what he can do when he is the focal point of the offense. So now he goes back into a role where he's going to have to split some time, split some reps. But I feel like there's kind of enough to go around between Bramer, Burkle, and Rapplier. So that's what they're going to lean on in offense, in addition to, well, we'll get to it in a second, running back. But I want to know your thoughts there with the tight end spot.
Look, I think they got 2 guys. Iowa State had tight ends forever. I have no concerns after seeing them play. That's plug and play. Mm-hmm. They can block on the edge. They can be red zone targets. I'm curious, and I don't know what they'll do exactly, but Rocco knows these guys. In certain situations, especially if they're down a guy or 2 at receiver, depending on injuries, how about red zone, moving them out into the slot and or out wide, trying to create mismatch? Are you going to put a safety out there one-on-one at the 5-yard line? Like, there's all kinds of weird things you can do when you have true talented tight ends. It's not fun playing 12 personnel if you're a normal defense, because do you put out an extra linebacker if they're going to run power and Rocco can run too, or are you going to play your nickel defense and a tight end gets to block a DB? Like, There's so many goofy things with tight ends because you don't know with 12 personnel, are they going to go power or are they going to spread? They can still go 4 or 5.
They can all catch. They're not just 6th offensive linemen. Bramer can catch. Raplier can catch. Burkle's more of the designated blocker, right? You know that Penn State's going to run power most of the time if he's in there, but he can still catch the football. It's not like he's totally inept as a wide receiver or as a jumbo receiver. That guy can go make plays in the passing game as well, just not to the extent of Bramer and Raplier.
Yeah, so that combination will probably create a lot of long conversations for opposing defensive staffs.
It's a good problem.
That's about all you can ask for. And if you have a little bit of luck with your wide receiver room, adding a couple more guys and don't have a ton of injuries, you'll be annoying in the passing game too. So I think they're fine there.
Running back. Let's pivot to running back. And then I think we've kind of almost answered the overarching question of what else does Penn State need by framing, hey, this is a weakness or a question mark. This is pretty set in stone. This is an overwhelming strength. Running back is another one of those. Brian, I look at this running back room. You add James Peoples, who could have been RB1, just never took that next step for Ohio State. He was in contention to be the starting running back for Ohio State this past season. You're getting the upside. You're getting someone that can come in and compete for reps. You add Carson Hansen, who has been the starter for the past couple of seasons at Iowa State, who almost reached 1,000 yards one season and then had 13 touchdowns another season the year prior. Quentin Martin had over 100 yards in the, I know it's the Clemson squad. That's not the best, but to not really play all that much this season and have 20 carries and give or take 100 yards. It was either at 100 or over 100 in the bowl game. That tells me that right there, you have Hansen, Martin, and Peoples who are all going to play and are reliable. Oh, and you get Cam Wallace back, who I thought was going to be with Quentin Martin, the backfield of the future for Penn State after Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen.
Yeah, I'm not going to guess on how they're going to rotate or who's going to play.
No idea.
Where.
Absolutely no idea.
I do know the following. As a general rule, running back is the easiest spot to pick up for young players that haven't played as much. It's more about raw talent than maybe any other spot other than maybe corner. Like either you got the hips to play corner or you don't. Mm-hmm. So I'm not worried about Penn State at running back. They'll figure it out. They've got enough guys, especially Iowa State coming over. Like that's a dude, 220-pound sledgehammer. Mm-hmm. They'll have a different kind of run game than some other teams. Not many teams really have a 220 guy that can make you miss. Katron's gone, but this kid's not a whole lot different. I'd say Katron's better if I had to take one or the other, but it's not a whole lot different than that. Then they got a few other guys that can make you miss. Yep. Who's going to be the second or third back? I have no idea. Yeah. I'm not worried about it. That's like low-hanging fruit, first world problems for Penn State.
Exactly.
Figure out defensive end, figure out receiver. Everything else should align at the end of the day.
So, like I said, that pretty much answers the question. We can address, okay, so Penn State is still targeting offensive linemen, but they're almost finished, I would say. It's a matter of filling depth. I don't sit back and say, oh, they don't have an answer at tackle. They don't have an answer at center or at one of the guard spots. It's nothing like that. I would like to see another guy that compete. You can never have too many offensive linemen because especially if you get thin there, you are not winning any ball games. So I like what the offensive line coach and Ryan Clanton has done to not only retain key players, guys who will start. Anthony Donko will start. Cooper Cousins will start. Garrett Sexton, Owen Alasini. Oh, don't forget about a former 5-star offensive lineman and Malachi Goodman. Those are all starting caliber players that, I mean, heck, I think I just named a starting 5 right there by the guys they simply retained. And then they go and add a Brock Riker from Texas State, who has a ton of upside and might even factor into the starting rotation for next season. It's really just, you take care of quarterback, you get your starter, you get your backup. Your running back room has 4 legitimate options. Wide receiver is the question mark. You don't need any more tight ends. You could use some backup offensive linemen. Defensive end, stand-up edge defender. That's obviously why we started the show with that. Linebacker, always want an extra star player there because you never know, right? Tony Rojas is coming off of an injury. Secondary, again, same thing. Situation where you just have a ton of guys. They're all starting caliber for the most part. So that's really where Penn State stands, Brian. You said it right out of the gate. You're much impressed. You are so much more impressed with where Penn State is now, previously to where we projected or could have thought was, not a good best case scenario.
Yeah, they're ahead of the curve. This could have been a lot worse at this point. I'm not saying Penn State's going to be top 5 next year, but compared to where they were even like 10 days ago, it's incredible. So give hats off to the staff, back office staff, everybody at Penn State for putting together a first year competitive team. Not everybody, when they have a major change like this, is in a good spot. That's very important. So hopefully, everything kind of comes together. But if they get receiver and DN kind of figured out, this could be an 8 or more win team next year. There's no reason to think it shouldn't be.
And with that schedule, 8-4 might be the floor, and a very distant floor. Again, schedule just really, really easy. But before we even project that, we got plenty more conversations to have all across the board. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Brian Smith, recruiting expert, portal expert here with the Locked On Podcast Network. That's going to do it for us on this edition. We're going to have plenty more follow-up conversations with players that hopefully Penn State will add. No more surprise departures. We've seen just some select departures that say, okay, you said you were coming back. Now you're in the portal. So hopefully no more of that, but some good key additions that do make Penn State more competitive going into 2026. Brian, I appreciate your time as always. To all the listeners and viewers on the show, thank you so much for joining us. Brian, can't wait to talk to you again in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. Take care.